we find ourselves at the creation of your script for Muppet Treasure Island. And
Yeah,
you told my assistant producer this is probably your favorite job you've ever had, writing the script for this movie. So I'm excited to talk to you about it. First, how did that job even come about?
I know it's crazy. Because of Hook, I got to meet Brian Henson.
Hmm.
I was a big Muppet fan, and because of all this stuff we were doing, and Disney was about to pull the plug on Muppet Treasure Island. And Brian called me and said, "Listen, because everybody I'd done Pirates and Hook and all that stuff." He said, "Can you maybe consider read the script and consider coming on because they're about to cancel it?" And they were close to building sets, and they'd spent all this time on it. Jerry Jewell was still alive, and the problem is that Frank Oz did not want to work with kid actors. He would only work with Muppets, even though he had 8 children. He did not want to work with a child actor playing Jim Hawkins. So I read the script and I said, "Yeah, and that script, Gonzo and Rizzo were Jim and Hawkins. There were Long John Silver was not even an actor. They were all Muppets." So I said, if you don't have two humans in this, if you don't have Long John Silver and Jim playing humans, you're gonna lose the audience. It's not Muppets Take Manhattan or the success of their first one was they had human actors also interacting with. So I wrote a couple of scenes.
Go
So we
figure.
huddled we huddled there for 4 or 5 days. Brian would come over, Alex Rockwell, we were all, and so I wrote a few scenes, and they gave the scenes to Frank Oz because he's the one we had to convince. Frank read the scenes and went, "These are great. Can we have more of them? This is what we need." So he agreed to come off of his position, and I will not work with child actors. Um, and Disney read the script and greenlit it instead of pulling the plug. But and working with them, working with Frank and working with Brian, and the whole Muppet crew, you realize that you're dealing with a historical. They're like an archaeological dig. I mean, we were trying to find a role to cast for Kermit, and Brian would say, "Nah, Kermit would never play that part. That's not Kermit. They're not gonna do good in that role." And we couldn't find a part for Miss Piggy. Literally, you were casting movie stars. It's like hey, Humphrey Bogart is going to play, a clown in a circus or something. It just, it doesn't work. Um, so that was the big lesson for me. And as I got to meet all of them, the guy who was playing, because Jim was dead by that point, Steve Whitmire was playing Kermit. You literally you had to deal with them as entities that were alive.
Hmm.
Uh, Once Frank Oz put his hand up Miss Piggy's skirt, he's Miss Piggy. And he stays Miss Piggy in between takes. That's who wrote this.
Whoops.
What could be a better line? Um, and you would get that all the time. And that's how they would talk to Brian when he was directing. They would talk to him in character. The table read at the studio in England was phenomenal. It was all of these great Muppet performers uh, that I had such respect for. And the set was so much fun. They all love what they're doing. And I took my kids, Jake and Julia had been on the Hook set, Dracula set, and they were huge Muppet fans. And I took them, we went there several days, and we made the mistake of sticking around after they shut down, and we're leaving. And Julia, who was then, I think, 9, walks by the cart, and all the Muppets are hanging on their posts,
Yeah.
and their eyes, and suddenly they look there, and she went, "Oh my God, they're dead." You know, and it was a wonderful experience, and there was just a joy. They loved going to work. All the crew, all the Muppet performers, you didn't have any of that bull.
Whoops.
You have a lot of sets between actors and what have you. Um, it was phenomenal, and I think it was the most joyous set I have ever been on, and probably will ever be on again. Yeah,
Was
it's
there
really
any
spectacular.
was there any story element that got cut from the script that you still think would have been just an absolute riot to see on screen?
You know, that's a good question. I spent a lot of time in the editing room. Brian let me go into the editing room, which is my favorite place to be. That's a good question. I do know we had to take things of Miss Piggy out that were too risque. We had to change dialogue. We had adults complaining in screenings. I know we had to take a couple of her bits out and change some of her dialogue. Um, I think Frank was having way too much fun with her being marooned on an island and having uh, cohabitation with Silver and anybody else, any other pirate that showed up. Um, she was a bit of a pig, so to speak.
Yeah.
Uh, but now in terms of set, oh, I know what it was. Yes, we had all these bits in the second act to get you from when they set sail to they got to Treasure Island, and we came up with, okay, we'll stretch Gonzo on a rack. We'll do all the, we had all these bits and we shot some of them. And the most boring part of any of these pirate movies is the voyage from here to there. Because what are you going to do? You get sick, fight a giant squid. You have to come up with stuff. So Brian solved it with a song, um, uh, Cabin Fever. So in the middle of the movie, and it was this great the couple who wrote the songs. Oh, they wrote everything up on the roof, everything. They wrote this song Cabin Fever. So in the middle of the movie, there's this ridiculous song that comes out of nowhere where everybody goes, "I got it too, Cabin Fever," And
Mhm.
then when the song is over, everybody looks at the camera and goes, ah, "Land ho," and there's Treasure Island. So there was a bunch of stuff that was shot to fill up that space that was cut out. Do I think it was better than Cabin Fever? No. Cabin Fever is still one of the best script solutions I've ever seen to a second act problem.
Hmm.
Because once you finish the song, you're there.
It's like boom, yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. Um,
Treasure Island.
how early was Tim Curry attached to the film? I mean, was it before you were finished writing or after? I'm kind of curious if you knowing it was going to be him playing the role of Long John Silver would have aided or molded your writing of that character.
I th I know that Brian had him in his mind early on. Um, I try not to let actors inform. I mean, when I'm writing, I try to write the character. The only time I ever broke that rule was when it was Hook. I wrote Peter for Dustin Hoffman. I mean, for Robin Williams. Robin was the only person, in my view, that could ever play that part. If you couldn't get Robin, don't do it. But no, I know Tim was. He was on Brian's radar very early on. So I wrote. I mean, I've grown up in Long John Silver. He's one of my favorite villains. I didn't need an actor to inspire me. Um, I didn't write Captain Hook for Dustin Hoffman. My Captain Hook was Daniel Day-Lewis in Last of the Mohicans. That would have been a different Hook. That's what I wrote. So, but I try not to do that. But Tim was incredible. Totally into it. He's a wonderful music man, and it was the right tone for Silver in a kid's, in a Muppet treatment of Treasure Island.